Hi, my name is Sridhar Rangayan. I'm the Festival Director of Kashish Mumbai International Queer Film Festival, which is having its 12th edition right now. So we have been seeing 200 plus films from 50 plus countries over the 3 weekends. But more importantly, we want to kind of have these panel discussions to talk about critical issues which concern the LGBTQ community. So today's panel discussion is titled "On Whose Shoulders We Stand, Remembering Their Stories, Her Stories, and Histories." So to moderate this particular panel discussion, we have Karim Ladakh, a Tanzanian-born Canadian citizen who reflects a true global footprint, having lived in 10 countries. So Karim has thought about the value of giving by his parents. Karim has co-founded several groups and held a variety of leadership positions, including the chair of Aga Khan Social Welfare of Canada, where he was the first openly gay man appointed to that position in the Ismaili Muslim community. Karim was recognized as one of the top 150 philanthropists in Canada in 2017. Karim ended a successful career as an executive at P&G and retired 8 years ago. He now dedicates his time to volunteering and helping people in need. Thank you, Karim, for joining in today and helping to moderate this panel discussion with stalwarts like ASHOK ROW KAVI. So who doesn't know ASHOK ROW KAVI? ASHOK ROW KAVI, wickedly called Amma in the hot house homosexual world of Mumbai, is in Salman Rushdie's parlance a midnight child for all those born during the independence of India in 1947. So he founded Bombay Dose, the first LGBTQ magazine in India, and also founded Humsafar Trust, India's first and largest LGBTQ organization. Ashok also initiated the Integrated Network for Sexual Minorities in October 2003, a national web of over 125 community-based organizations of MSM, TG, and LBT groups. Ashok presently works with varied issues, from working as trainer and educator for street children's groups and advisor for the first senior gay men's support group in India, the Mumbai Teenager. Now, next to GOPI SHANKAR, Madurai. GOPI SHANKAR Madurai is an Indian equal rights and indigenous rights activist. Shankar was one of the youngest and the first openly intersex and genderqueer candidates to contest in 2016 Tamil Nadu Legislative Assembly election. Shankar is also the founder of Srishti Madurai Student Volunteer Collective. Shankar's work inspired the Madras High Court, Madurai branch, to direct the government of Tamil Nadu to order a ban on forced sex-selective surgeries for intersex infants. In December 2017, Shankar was selected to the executive board of ILGA Asia. In August 2020, the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment appointed Shankar as a South Regional representative of the National Council for Transgender Persons. Thank you for joining in, Gopi. Really appreciate you joining in. And no need for another introduction, a stalwart herself, Ruth Vanitha. She has taught at Delhi University for 20 years and now teaches at University of Montana. She is the author of many books, including Love's Right, Same-Sex Marriages in Modern India, and the novel Memory of Light. Ruth Vanitha taught English at Delhi University for 20 years and is now professor at the University of Montana. She was founding co-editor of Manushi, 1978 to 1990, India's first nationwide feminist magazine. She's author of several books, including Memory of Life, which depicts love and marriage between women in 18th century India, Love's Right, Same-Sex Marriages in Modern India, and Gender, Sex and City, Urdu Rekhti Poetry in India, and Dancing with the Nation, Courtesans in Bombay Cinema. She is the co-editor of the pioneering Same-Sex Love in India, a literary history, and has translated many works of fiction and poetry from Hindi and Urdu to English. Most notably, Chocolate Stories on Male and Male Desire by Pandey Bechan Sharma Ugra. She divides her time between Miswala and Gurgaon. Thank you, Ruth, for joining in. Welcome to the panel discussion. And we're going to be discussing about, as I said already, their stories, her stories, and histories. And over to you, Karim, for moderating this beautiful panel discussion.
Wow, Sridhar, you should be an anchor. My goodness, look at you and your background. Anyway, my name is Karim, pronouns he, he, and I am dialing in from Toronto today. And Ruth, I must confess, did you start teaching when you were 5?
I was 20. I was 20.
Just joking. You look incredibly young for such accomplishments. A couple of things before we get started, folks. One is, I've read your biographies, Gopi, Ashok. I don't need to read your biography, but I actually visited the Wikipedia site yesterday to update myself as well. And it's such an incredible honor for me, I tell you, to be able to moderate this panel. Thank you for having me. Thank you for indulging me. Thank you for making your time on a Sunday evening. And we really, really appreciate all 3 of you. And we would like to thank the Canadian Consulate General for their contribution and enabling this panel. And one last but not least personal note I wanted to say is when I moved to Bombay I went for a look-see visit in October 1989. And Ashok literally took me in his arms and babysat me through my entire stay there. He was my mentor, he was a friend. He, had my back. And so Ashok, I will never, ever forget those memories. I'll cherish them forever. But a deep, deep thank you to you for everything you've done for me in my journey as well.
Thank you.
Oh,
thank you.
Yeah, such wonder. He called me Karishma, and he called me Karishma, and I called him Rauben.
Rauben is a new one, but I accept it. Makes me feel younger.
Okay. Yeah. Now, before we get into the the questions, the title that we have today is On Whose Shoulders We Stand. And it's a very inspiring title. But I just wanted to preface it with a few thoughts, right? Because it's not one single set of shoulders. After we come out in whatever identity we've elected to come out in, whether it's intersex or transgender or it's a lesbian woman. So what I was saying is, on whose shoulders we stand, literally is such a layered conversation because we come to terms with ourselves in whatever identity we're in. And then there are all these other, what I call textures or layers, peeling the onion, which is what geography you live in, what the legal, statuses of our identities in the countries that we live in. There is the urban versus rural. Sometimes, during the AIDS epidemic, we saw that finance had a big impact on people having access to, medical health and so forth. So our journeys are so layered. And so I just wanted to say that because not just, can religion, other things have an impact on our journey and therefore, maybe some of our rebellion, but many other factors as well. And to wrap it all up, then, in a global movement, the impact example for 377 that it had on some countries in the Caribbean. So there is no isolated event that happens. We are all in this journey together, and the three of you are extremely experienced. And when we ask you the questions, I fully expect extremely different answers. There's no right answer because our journeys are all different. Is that fair?
That's clear. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. I know stating the obvious, but just wanted to throw that in because it's not one set of shoulders. So with that, I want to start with the first question. And Gopi, I'm going to start with you, okay, on this question. So you'll need to unmute. What motivated you to come out and become an advocate for LGBTQIA rights? What was the trigger or the sets of triggers?
When I was looking at issues, to understand myself, to accept myself, it itself was a journey. It was a kind of a huge process. Everybody go through that process. And when I started, things, most of the literature or everything, whatever was available was in English. So we thought of bringing the discourse down to Tamil, and then that's how, okay, we should have our own space, and then we should not be kind of, because I lived in Madurai, and so the thing is that, that should work in Madurai context, and whatever works in Chennai context never works in Madurai context. So what motivated me is that there was no resources or any materials available earlier, and then we thought of okay, a lot of bloggers used to write stories, but most of them were erotic porn stories, that too based only on gay identities or issues related to it. So very less representation we had on various other issues. So that triggered me, and similar people joined together in the after school, and then we joined in the same university, and then we just sort of starting the Srishti Madurai student movement, and then like we started this 24/7 helpline, which offered counseling in at least 8 South Indian languages, Tamil, Malayalam, Telugu, Kannada, Beri, Tulu, Konkani, and all these languages. So this was kind of, and we gave our own phone numbers. We never had any funds, and like we don't know we don't even know what was NGO or CGO, all this means at the time, and it was like more movement, oriented thing, and it was like enthusiastic youngsters from different colleges joining together and bringing. We put notices on different dating sites that we are gathering here in a particular place. Please come and meet us. Like, we are not gathering for dating or mating. We are gathering for a particular purpose. So when you come here, when you come here, please do respect the space. Also, like that, we tell them. So it was interesting. But then, that was a kind of trigger in the sense, like. When I started all these things, I started looking at a lot of people like Ashok or Ruth, including Sridhar. Like in 2012, we had a shooting with 2 boys kissing each other in the American college campus. We sent a few shots, photographs to even Kashish. Kashish was like a big festival, but then, we looked up to different people, also from different cities, because one thing is, the work of Ruth Vanita was very fascinating. The enormous amount of the work, whatever she, left or, continuing, it is something was inspiring, and it was it was giving a base for our movement, or a kind of a resource for our movement. We don't plagiarize, but then we had to convert it in Tamil, or translate it in Tamil to the Tamil audience and different peoples here. And also Ashok, when it comes to Ashok, starting Gay Bombay, and then becoming Amma and all those things, and then being so popular in Maratha, and then some Hindi speaking regions, and then also he is a bit popular in Chennai and different regions. But then Ashok as an individual had a lot of impact on us, definitely. And Sridhar, by starting all this film festival, bringing in a lot of celebrities and all those things, so that did also kind of created a lot of impact on us in 2012 and all this thing. So we started all this in 2011. Nothing triggered, but we thought of, okay, we should have this.
Several things. A confluence of several factors. Your own particular journey, the fact that resources in your part of the world were scarce, the fact that sometimes you find solidarity and the movement grew. So thank you for your response, Gopi. And just so you know, I remember Ashok making sure in 1990 and 1991 that the doctors, HIV specialists, remember Ashok, you made sure, I think you had one in Chennai as well. Right. So he's always got this global focus. You're absolutely right. I don't know Ruth personally, but hopefully we'll get to know each other better, Ruth. So Ruth, what were your big triggers that got you going on the journey, that propelled you to move forward?
Well, in the 1980s, when I was working in the women's movement, I didn't know any other gay Indian person. I knew there must be others, but I didn't know anyone. And the first faces of gay Indians that I saw was in 1980, these 2 girls in Kerala, Lalita and Malika, who had tried to commit joint suicide and left their love letters and their suicide note behind. And then I started collecting reports of these young, mostly women, couples who had either got married or had had committed suicide, or both. So I was collecting those, and I collected everything I could find in the newspapers on the subject in general. There was no movement to speak of at the time. In 1987, I met a few gay men in Delhi, and then we started having social gatherings at the house of one friend, and there was only one other woman there, Manjari, whom I sort of knew as an acquaintance. I didn't know about Geeti Thadani. I never met her till much later in the 90s. I never went to her office or anything. Then when Bombay Dost came out, that was the first like Indian thing, and then there was the Siddharth Gautam Film Festival in mid-90s that I went to. But basically, my work was an attempt to educate myself. It started with English literature, where in the classroom the word was never mentioned, and nothing was mentioned about the lives of, say, people like E.M. Forster or Shakespeare, even, or Auden or anyone. So first I wrote on English literature, and then later I knew almost nothing about Indian literature, pre-modern Indian literature in general. So it was an education when I started working. We started working on same-sex love in India. It was an education not just on this subject, but on Indian literature and philosophy. It was the beginning of that when I read the Mahabharata, the whole Mahabharata, and my next book is on Mahabharata and Ramayana. Read the whole Mahabharata, read the Purans, etc. It was eye-opening and very illuminating and opened up whole worlds to me. So that was, one element. That was a major element in the whole thing. And then I remember when I translated Ugra's Chocolate, which are these stories published in the 1920s, and which caused the first public debate on homosexuality in India. It was Ashok who first told me about it. He told me that there was a gay man who had come to the Bombay Dost office or Hamsafar office and had told him that when Ugra's stories came out in 1927, that they had lined up around, there were lines around the office, and many of them were these gay men, they might not have called themselves that, who were waiting to buy like the book to see something written about them. Even though Ugra's intentions, he said, were very negative, were to portray homosexuality so that it should be eradicated or whatever. But still, it was something written about them. And so that's how I came to know about that and translated that. So it's still a continuing, I learned Urdu in order to work on Urdu poetry. So it's been a very educative process, and yeah.
Thank you, Ruth. It sounds like a very organic journey for you, like it just all happened, but kudos to you for, translating and learning and making, your wisdom essentially accessible to other people as well. So we will move to Ashok, and I hate to ask Ashok what your triggers or set of triggers were, because I think Ashok was born a trigger.
Someone asked me when did I come out, and recently in an online interview, and I said I was never in, but I remember that the first trigger really was me looking at my colleagues on the play field, talking about girls in a very sexual way. We were about to finish, I think, a football or a hockey game. I don't really know, and I was having a huge affair with my captain. And they were talking, but suddenly a group of women came in, girls came in, and they were talking about them in I thought, a very derogatory way, So I was horrified that boys had sex with girls, because I never thought that it was that bad, When I say bad, means I didn't believe that men and women had sex. I thought men and sex. And I immediately went home and I started quizzing my father, who was a wonderful man. My father was a friend, not my father. And I told him, this is what I heard on the play field. Is it true that boys and girls have sex? So poor chap, he considered himself liberal, whatever. And he tried to explain it to me by taking a plug and a socket. And he said, a plug is what you have. You know what I mean? So I said, yes, I know what you mean. And then the girls have the socket. And have you seen what girls have? So I said, yes. And so the plug goes into the socket and the electricity flows and the lights come on and it's wonderful. So of course, he saw the expression on my face and he was, I think, a little concerned because I was horrified. I told Daddy, that looks very unhygienic, and he says, what do you mean? No, that's not the way it should be. So I was trying to interrogate him. Poor chap, but he was wonderful. He took it so well. He said, what do you think it should be? I said, boys should go with boys and girls should go with girls. So he said, why do you think so? Because then I said, because they know each other's bodies. I don't know the girl's body, and she's got something else. I don't have the same thing. Well, what should I do with it? That's how the conversation went, without guilt, without any type of shame. He's a wonderful man. And the first copies of, he got me the two collected works of Havelock Ellis at the age of 12. And they're still here behind my back in the bookshelf. I still carry them everywhere I go. And I was horrified to learn that there was no mention of homosexuality in those two books. I always, was told about homosexuals and homos and that. And I was a bit worried. So I wanted to learn about it. I went through the whole book and there was no mention of the word homosexuality. And then I discovered much later on that homosexuality was a name given to us and what we do in 1889 by an Austrian clinical psychologist, Caroline Maria Gerbeni. And my journey started from those books and went further. And of course, there were intersections, like I was having sex with the sweeper's son, and there was a lot of consternation with my mother concerned about it. But my father diffused it all, He would really say that, look, what he's doing is not, I don't consider it wrong. I don't know why. What's your problem? He's exploring, relations with other men, other women, whatever it is. And I think we shouldn't take it that badly. He'll grow up okay. So the trigger was really how I engaged with the world and discovered that I was not the same like other boys. And of course, that led to me exploring things. My dad always got me books when I wanted them. And it was incredible. I still have them with me, many of them. I also have been given books by the Kinsey Institute, for example, The Homosexual Matrix, which has been written by Kinsey's protege, C.A. Trips. These sort of books, pioneering books, are with me. And I think I learned a lot from looking at our sacred literature, which showed that many of us were there, existing in our history. So I wasn't the only person. I only had to go and find where the others were. Because throughout our history, throughout our sacred history, there were people like me, Shikhandi, a little effeminate. The others didn't want to fight them. There are talk in the Buddhist scriptures and this about effeminate men should not be taken in the monastery. They create problems. So I knew that there were issues out there that I didn't know about. And there was a bigger world, and it was necessary for me to explore it. And I did. I mean, meeting someone like you, for example, was incredible. But you were one of the first persons from outside India who was Indian, who was gay, and who had no guilt or this about it. And we explored Bombay together, remember that. And, we met practically half the gay community together. So it was, for me, the trigger was the fact that I discovered that I was different. And I had to know why. And then I had to know who I was. That was the trigger.
You're still a walking encyclopedia, by the way, Ashok. So, I don't know why you carry those books around with you, because you remember everything. But I thought when I asked you, when did you come out? I thought your answer was from my mommy's tummy,
I don't want to blame mommy for everything,
Okay. Now we will need to move at a slightly faster clip. I could go on with this for 3 hours, but I know we don't have the time, by the way. I'm just so enjoying this. In a few words, what would you say? I'm going to change the question slightly, not to say what were the major roadblocks, but what was the one biggest roadblock in your journeys? And I'm going to start with Ashok this time.
Oh dear. The roadblocks were that there were no models in and around me. There were no people who I could be with. If I had to go and have sex with somebody in a park, it was very difficult for me to say, I'd like to meet you tomorrow. They didn't want to meet again. I might meet him somewhere in another park, but there were no role models in those days. There were no people who you could socialize with. You could have sex with them, but you couldn't socialize with them. They're two different things. And it was an incredibly difficult thing to gather a group of men who thought like me, who had sex with each other or had sex with other men, and not be ashamed of it, or wouldn't talk very derisively about it, because I didn't like us being put down all the time. I wanted to be with people who made me feel good. So that was a major block in finding my own kind. One. Secondly, there was the other thing of this hostility from. It was a strange type of hostility, as if this is terrible, this is wrong, uh, it's not done. The fact that it is not a reproductive behavior. My father was the first person who said, "Oh, it's a type of masti. It's mischief. Let him do. It's a method of him finding out what he is." So that took away the guilt and shame from me because of my father. But the rest of the world was not like that, Karim. The world outside was full of barriers like shame, guilt, people saying that, oh my God, this is unacceptable. This, this came out in the paper, this came out in talks, that we usually had or heard about. And that was an obstacle. So one wondered, what's wrong with it? Why is it considered wrong? I mean, is it wrong because God doesn't like it? One still thought about all this. And,
of course.
And then one came to know that there were barriers, but they were man-made. When you looked at the fact that a place like India was so pluralistic and diversified, there had to be place for us. We saw hijras, for example, on the street. I didn't identify with them, but I knew they were different. So just like that, I was different. So finding that and finding those barriers and trying to get over them was immensely difficult. I'll be very frank about it.
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you. Ashok, just for our viewers who may not know, your mother turned out to be an incredibly positive force in your life.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yes. And I just wanted to mention that.
She was and she wasn't, because I never got a closure from her. But I'll speak about that later. My mother always stood by me. And it was a wonderful, wonderful way she stood by me. Rock solid. But I never got something that she had said when I said no to marriage. She said she had found a wonderful marriage proposal, and I said no. And she said something, you were my first child, and you are my first child, and you were a premature child. And I raised you with great difficulty, me and your grandmother. But today I hope that you had died when you were born. That hurt me so much that I bent over backwards to be good to her. I was the son who looked after her right until then.
I remember that. I remember that.
Yes.
Met her many times. She was, rest her soul, rest in peace. But
and I only got a closure towards the end from when she apologized to me through her caregiver. She told her caregiver that, please tell Ashok that, I can't speak to him about this, but tell him that I'm sorry I had said that, and I was deeply touched by it, but it wasn't a closure. She didn't say it to me. She said it to my caregiver.
It was her way. It was her way.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. I still remember my first meal at your Shivaji Park home, and and so we will move to Ruth now. And so Ruth, if you think about roadblocks, I think you mentioned them a little bit, but what jumps to mind as being, that's the biggest battle I've had to fight?
Well, as Ashok said, in the 80s and 90s, I knew men, a lot of men after a certain point after 87, but it's very hard to find know any women. And so it was a matter of guessing. You think somebody is, but is she or not? You can be mistaken. she may herself not know. And then there was this phenomenon of people being out in the West and not being out in India. So which creates a very situation where you can't tell, you have to be hiding, they would be hiding in India, but not hiding abroad. So it was confusing. Yeah, that was the reason I migrated. Otherwise, I had never had any intention to migrate. When I was in the MA, many of my classmates just went straight to the West and did a PhD there, but I did my PhD in India, and I never had any intention to migrate. I migrated very late in life, and it was only because of this, because of the sort of the isolation, the personal isolation. Yeah, I guess so. That was one roadblock, and the other, I guess, is everywhere in the world, the sort of heterosexism that we have both internally and externally is the assumption, like Ashok was saying, he assumed that everyone was men were having sex with men. But most of us assume that someone is heterosexual till they say otherwise, till it becomes evident otherwise. And so that's a problem. And then, of course, the laws and upheld this. Till 2018, we had that anti-sodomy law the British had left. And even now, we don't have civil rights in India. We don't have equal civil rights at all, which makes it very difficult for a lot of people. You have a partner you've lived with for 20 years or 40 years, or whatever. The person is a legal stranger. They have no rights whatsoever over anything, and so it's I don't want to go into too many details, but it's very difficult, and that's why we have all these cases for marriage before the courts for marriage equality. And otherwise, I should say that I have found, and that's just my experience, that I spend we go to India and we are there for every summer, and we're there very often in the winter as well. So we have a house there, we have a flat, we have the whole setup. This year we couldn't because of Corona, but otherwise we do. So we spend a lot of time there, and I have to say, neighbors, friends, etc. Sort of, we don't make any statement to them, but they see the family together, and they are just, they just take it in their stride. We don't make any song and dance about it, but they take it completely in their stride. I've never had, including people working for us, etc., the driver, whoever, I remember once going to a yoga class with my wife, and it was in totally Hindi-speaking women in Gurgaon. And they asked, "Are you married?" and all that. And when she said, and she showed them pictures of our wedding, and they were all very pleased and excited and happy to see the pictures. I think as long as it doesn't come to your immediate family, then that's when people panic. But when it doesn't come to the immediate family, a lot of people are okay with other people and that doesn't mean, of course, everyone is, but a lot, I think, are. So, I remember growing up in India too, how people are used to so many different customs and ways of life. Like, in our family, we never went to the cinema. We had a whole lot of rules of things we didn't do. But people never worried about it or thought about it because everybody belonged to some group that was doing something strange. Indians are used to a lot of ways of life. They kind of are not surprised by it. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, you bring up so many good points, and the subtext of what you're saying is also, we grow up with our own biases, and, it's taken me a lot to uncover and unpeel, to shake my sexist bias, and it sounds very easy to do, but it's not, because it comes up in my family all the time, and my intersectional lens says I've got to fight for it, right? And so there are so many things that are nuanced in there. Before I let you go on this particular question, Ruth, did you have any roadblocks in publishing?
In publishing? Only, well, at the beginning with same-sex love in India, the publishers were wary. In India, they were very wary. And so they thought, especially the Hindu materials will be challenged, that no, this is not there, and this translation is wrong. So they wanted the English translation to be on one page, and next to it, the original, in the original language. Now there are 15 languages. That would have made the book totally unmanageable, right? So then it was first published in the US, but then a few years later, just a couple of years later, it was also published in India, and there wasn't any problem. And then now we, of course, have a situation where publishers are very anxious to publish anything, and they don't always even look at quality. They're willing to publish anything that is supposedly queer or whatever. So it has changed rapidly. I mean, it's pretty rapid. In 20 years, it has changed so much. So no, I didn't have any problem finding publishers. Like for my novel, I wasn't sure, but the 3 top English publishers all wanted it. So yeah, the publishing hasn't been.
That's really, really good to know. So I'm just gonna, give you a little bit of an update. I'm gonna not do question number 4 if you're okay with it, because I don't want to interrupt, and I'd sooner have quality versus quantity of questions. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for the panel? Okay. Okay. So Gopi, will move on to you and inquire about your roadblocks, though I think you mentioned a lot of them already in your introduction.
Because it was like my college days when I started all this, and I had to manage and balance everything, and one of the roadblocks was like, those days my language was also not that good, and so I had to, with experience, I had to learn a lot of things, and I mean, moving up with different communities and people from different religion, and because it's variety of people, mixture of culture and traditions. The place where I studied in the American college, where we have a lot of Americans and Europeans visiting us then and then to study various things. It was because those days I don't know what was left wing, right wing, political left, or what is political right, or I was completely like kind of so untouched by any of the discourse of the metropolitan or the Eurocentric or the American things, but the roadblock in the sense that there are a lot of issues. I mean, it was not easy for us to openly run few things or do few things. For example, we try to organize various camps and programs or workshops with self-funded groups in various schools and colleges. Those people were not very inviting in 2011, 12 in places like Madurai and all that. Now we see most of the colleges, universities, talk this, oh, Pride Month. It's like become like a fashion for them. But then initially it was like, because now you see when you see Tamil language, apart from male, female, like sorry, man, woman, and transgender people, most of the terminologies in Tamil, we coined the regional terms. So with people who don't even agree with who don't agree with my political views also use the terminologies which we coined. So people across the political spectrum use the terminologies which we kind of bring into the discourse. Earlier there was no even terminologies was not there. So we came up with these terminologies. We introduced the concept of genderqueer and a lot of things. Oh, what this Gopi is talking about 58 gender identities. He's trying to, kind of, and then the popular LGBT discourse in Chennai was very different, and it was more party-centric or, like gathering, people were gathering, than more advocacy or activities-centric. So, I mean, I faced a lot of challenges within the community than from the society, I believe. I do face a lot of problems from my professors, people around me, but then later I could kind of, turn them towards me, the work, because we introduced gay literature as part of curriculum. Ruth Vanita's book is part of curriculum in American college now. Earlier, this Funny Boy by Shyam Selvadurai that we introduced there. I mean, at that time, even in JNU, they didn't have gay literature as part of curriculum in the mainstream, English, degrees and all that. So I faced a lot of challenges and problems within the communities. That was kind of a roadblock, and also, especially I published a book in Tamil, which is the first book on this diverse subject in Tamil language, which is used in, a larger Tamil diaspora, like in Singapore, they use it, in Sri Lanka, they use it, in Tamil universities, certain universities, they use it. it was not an easy thing for us to, easily just get it published just like that. Initially, the publisher who published it now was not okay with publishing it in 2013 or 14. So it got published by the same publisher who refused it in only 2017 or 18, because we got a kind of mainstream political support, and a lot of people, we made a lot of people to talk about that. So
right. Okay, so you bring up several points, but this whole conversation has brought to light the role of language, right? And at least a couple of dimensions to it. When I came out to my parents in 1982, there's no word in Kutchi, my mother tongue, for gays. So I had to dance around for 20 minutes before I understood what I was saying. But even within India, it's so complex, because India is this vast subcontinent, not just a country, right? So thanks for highlighting that. Before I let you go, Gopi, on this particular question, and so the question was the journey that you've had, kind of leading the movement on intersex, right? How did you was that something that was difficult, or was it very natural? What would you say to our viewers?
Related to intersex, I mean, the term was new. The term is new. Many medical practitioners don't know the term. I was completely unaware of the term. I myself thought, okay, earlier I thought, okay, I belong to this larger queer community of homosexuals or whatever it is. And then later, okay, this LGBT term came, and then we have a lot of other terminologies coming in today. So then the term intersex, even before the term intersex, we had a lot of medical terminologies which were given to people like me especially, and then even now doctors don't use the term intersex in their in none of our medical records. None of the doctors in the global medical community use the term in the official medical records. They mention there are at least 40 diverse intersex variations. Only 3 to 4 variations are visible during the birth, and doctors do mention only those variations while karyotyping, only if the karyotyping test takes place. So the issue with intersex is that I was very clear that I don't want to be a trans woman. I don't want to be a trans man. I'm not comfortable with my male or female body, but my sex characteristics was different because my chromosomes were a bit different. And then okay, so then I was more comfortable with the non-binary term. That's where, one of my friend in 2012, she designed this non-binary flag, and then we were the first to use it in any pride parades in the world. In Madurai, we used it. And later in 2013, Morgan Carpenter, again one of my friend from Australia, he designed this intersex flag, and then the term becomes so popular after 2008. So we started giving regional terminologies for these terms, but even before these terms came into place, we have our own indigenous terminologies. But then even within the traditional Hijra Jamaat or Haveli system, they have a very unique identity that I found out, because in none of the Hijra, Haveli or Jamaat system, or within the traditional indigenous transgender identities, people like me were allowed to beg or do prostitution. And also we were kept in a very higher pedestal comparatively than because they considered such people are naturally born with the nirvana status, or maybe who attained womanhood at the time when they born. So they have different interpretations, and it's vast. We can't discuss it in one discussion. So coming back to the issue, that is it was natural that so I was from the beginning leading the non-binary movement, and then I was telling that don't limit everything to few identities, and don't give definitions to gay lesbian issues, and stick to it, because we are talking about fluidity. We're not talking about any kind of static issues here. We are challenging the static norms where things are quite rigid. So like a river, we need to flow, and because river kind of forms its waves, right? So we are so lively, so we need to kind of be live I thought, and then because there is nothing called in order. That's what the Sanatan Dharma or the Hinduism teach me. So don't follow something in order like that. So the most important thing was that I see a lot of people were mixing up the issues of intersex and transgenders here, and the ministries, including the doctors, were not clear. So I started writing about all this. I educated the medical practitioners, judicial body members, and all. That's how some of the senior advocates who attended our classes, they become the sitting judges of the high courts in different parts. Then they came up with a judgment saying that, the bodily integrity of the infant, who was born healthy, is something important. When we are kind of, performing an unnecessary medical intervention on such infants, there should be a medical protocol. We need to make these doctors accountable. And so that's why even before US, even before many European countries, Tamil Nadu became the first state in India to ban sex selective surgeries in 2019. August 13, we passed a government order. I drafted the government order personally. Even the definitions, if you see, I wrote it in a very inclusive manner. And I took inspiration from the larger LGBT movement. Without all of you, I would have not led this because because we are deeply interconnected. I believe, even though our identity.
Agree completely. Well, thank you very, very much for all the work on this relatively new subject in our movement. And I'm really happy as a person as well as an Indian to see the intersectionality where you are cross-referencing Ruth and Ashok and many others whose shoulders we have stood on. I'll move on to my last question because the intersectionality piece is almost irrelevant. You've told me already on this panel how intersectional you operate, okay? And there are, for our viewers, and many of them who will know you and are experienced activists, there will be emerging activists there too. And so in 2 minutes, I'm gonna ask you to keep it to just 2 minutes. Could you tell us what advice you would give those emerging activists? And this time I will start with you.
It would depend. I can't give advice to anyone. I can only talk about what my own guidelines have been. And my guidelines have been to focus on the positive, to focus on joy. Of course, there's a negative and one has to talk about suffering, and I do. But at the same time, my focus, and not just on this subject, on all subjects that I write about, my focus is on the positive. I think that is what keeps anyone going, keeps us going, and keeps the world going. So that's one of my guidelines. And the other guideline is to, when you focus on that, I think that joy to some extent exudes from you. And as I said, that makes others also feel stronger and feel, yes, this is something we can do.
And you definitely exude that. It's such a simple and profound, learning that you have given to others who follow in your footprints. I'm going to move to Ashok now.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank Ruth for bringing up Section 377. I never knew it was there because I was so busy having sex. The point I'm trying to say is that it was Bombay Dose which actually printed the first article on Section 377 in its first issue. And there, Mr. Shrikant Bhatt, one of the best criminal lawyers in Bombay, he pointed out that Section 377 would be a great hindrance because we were undeclared felons. It was a criminal act that our sex life was criminal. And that's when I got scared. So you see, what are the things I would like to tell a young activist is that a lot of work has already been done for you. You have to build on what we have managed to achieve. It took from 1990 all the way to 2018 or 16, the Supreme Court judgment. It took us nearly 30 years. So now, don't let the other matters, our citizenship rights, our equal rights, same-sex marriage, don't let it wait that long. Start working on it systematically so that we get what are called our citizenship rights. These are very simple. I mean, are you treated the same way as another person in your office, in your school? Like, there are colleagues of mine who have brought out manuals against bullying of gay children in school, and it's been done by UNESCO. Now, that sort of thing has to be done and institutionalized. Our medical books are still talking about gay issues as if we are criminals, as if we are perverts, as if we are deviants. These are doctors who are supposed to be treating us. So there's a lot of work to be done. But most of that heavy lifting has been done by people like Ruth, by people like, say, the people who wrote articles for Bombados, by people like a good old Gopi, who has sort of broadened out the whole issue of LGBT rights and, brought out the other contours in it, the intersectionality, as you said. This has been done. And as far as I'm concerned, the heavy work has been done. Now it's for the young activists to take this forward. And frankly, I'm so glad that you asked that question.
I mean, this is such sage advice again, after Ruth, because what you're saying is sometimes we have taken, it's like fast track the new building blocks. There are more of us. And the other thing that you have said that just really struck me, which absolutely makes sense, is codify it, institutionalize these things, right? Because we've fought for our rights. Now they need to become a part of our culture.
Absolutely.
And broadly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ashok. Gopi, you've been a pioneer, not just in what you've done for intersex, but also what you've done in the South, to make sure that the language and everything is translated. What advice would you give to a young emerging activist, meaning, this is what I would just, impart some wisdom. Your words?
I don't believe in advice, but then one thing I can say is that a lot of groundwork need to be done, and we need to look at the grassroots realities. For example, people are protesting, against the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights bill. I mean, to live as a trans woman, every trans woman need to pay at least 3 lakh rupees as a tax to their senior Nayaks. And then after the operation, they will be forced into, begging, and they will be domesticated into prostitution, which is otherwise known as sex work. The point here is that a lot of things need to be done. In this 21st century, those people who are talking against caste and various other issues never open their mouth about the oppression within the community. First, we need to talk about the discrimination within the community. Then we can talk about the discrimination from the public. The discrimination within the community is vast. It is growing day by day. And we are following certain political ideologies like a religion, which is highly problematic. And the discourse of left and right, polarizing everything. We have a lot of problems in India, but the solution for those problems should be indigenous from India, or Asia-centric, not Eurocentric or American-centric, I believe. So those people who are elitists or working with vested interests, they need to kind of think back and sit and think back that what they have done, and because they are completely destroying the constructive activism left by people like Ruth or Ashok or Giti or a lot of people to name, like a lot, not single. I mean, there are a lot of nameless people. And what is more important is that a lot of activists, pride parades, protests are important. But even what is more important is that we are living in still a third world or like a global south countries where still people struggle to access to good clean drinking water and food facilities, where sometimes we are not kind of meeting the reality or knowing the reality when we are talking something from Mumbai or writing opinions in some foreign newspapers. So my piece of advice is that come to grassroots activism, look at individuals, look at those people who don't have a community for themselves. And we are trying to kind of bring people together. No one is a leader here. We are trying to facilitate where we are trying to kind of support each other, because it's a blessing for ourselves, I believe. What we are doing is a blessing for ourselves, I believe. And what I'm seeing is a lot of destructive, venomous social media warriors and social media wars, which is which is not good for our blood pressure, neither good for the community. So do something constructive, because of which, for example, we focused on a lot of individual cases like Swapna, India's first transgender gazetted officer, was created because none of the elitist groups supported her case. Shanti Soundararajan, first Tamil woman to win a medal at Asian Games, was stripped of her medals because of sex verification test. Later, with our support, Tudi Chand's case was challenged too, because of which Rio Olympics became first Olympics which took place without sex verification test in the Olympic history because of Indians. I mean, like that, we can focus on a lot of constructive activism. A lot of people are living without proper shelters. So that's one piece of advice, is that, don't look at the food at your plate alone. Just also make sure that all those people, whom you talk about, whom you're trying to sell sometimes, have the food, in their plate too. Yeah.
Absolutely, Gopi, very, very wise words, because I think, as many others have said, we're only strong as our weakest link, right? And so, if my fellow sister lesbian does not have what she needs, or the transgender community, you use the metaphor of a river. We're all in this together, and we need to move together, because the more of us there are, the more power there is in the river. So thanks for, sharing that wisdom with us. The only comment I would give you is that, these biases within the LGBTIQ plus communities, are not just, in the global South, right? I mean, they're rampant in the global North, right? I mean, we just talked about the Indigenous community in Canada, our two-spirited, communities, and some of the, injustices done there. So where I sit in the global North, it's acknowledged, that it's still pretty well a white man's world, out there. And so we just need to come together, educate people, do it positively, as Ruth has advised us. And as Ashok said now, codify, just institutionalize the whole thing. Before we wrap up, I just want to say I have found this session extremely inspiring. I was already inspired by several people when I was living in India, like Ashok, like Sridhar, like many, many others who've paved the way for us before, some of us, not me, but some of the people maybe not be born. But to see this amazing set of, leaders and activists in, my country of origin, I always say, you can take me out of India, but you can't take India out of me, right? Because my blood is still 100% Indian, right? So I found this extremely inspiring. Thank you all very, very much for participating in today's panel. We wish you continued success, and it was wonderful, wonderful being with you. I am like I'm drunk on life right now, Thank you so much. And Ashok, we will do an exchange of shawls, okay?
We must.
You're mute.
Good to see you.
Okay.
You seem to have become younger, and I think you've had another facelift.
I was waiting for that to come. It took a full hour.
Okay, can I wrap up this?
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Kareem, for moderating this brilliant panel discussion talking about their stories, her stories, and his stories. Thank you for this. Thank you, Ashok, Ruth, and Gopi, for sharing your journeys and your vision for the future. And if you have any questions for any of them, Ashok, Kareem, Ruth, or Gopi, please put it in the comment box below, and I'll make sure they see that and respond to your question or comment, hopefully. So, and there's still one more week of Kashish still remaining. So please stay tuned to more updates about Kashish. Please check out our website, mumbaiqfs.com. And a big, big thanks to Consulate General of Canada for supporting this particular panel discussion, and also supporting a bunch of films which we're screening at Kashish 2021. So thank you, Consulate General of Canada, for facilitating this. And thanks each one of you for participating in this particular discussion.